Absolutely. So we are really proud of the fact that California has been at the forefront of changing the national conversation about food safety and food additives and school nutrition. And over the past 2 years, I've actually passed two bills related to food additives. The first was the California Food Safety Act, which banned a number of harmful additives, and that included red dye number 3. And then more recently, last year, we passed the California School Food Safety Act, which banned a number of synthetic food dyes from schools, from food served in school. And that was based on research that was done by state scientists in the state of California that really helped to underscore the harms to children that these food dyes can pose, both to neurobehavioral challenges and hyperactivity and some other issues in kids.
Absolutely. I think the science is out there that supports us needing to do something and take action. So really appreciate the California study, brought a lot of details out about the neurological issues and the behavioral problems that were coming from food dyes. So I think states must act. It's a no-brainer.
We think there's a really strong case for federal regulation here. What I found when I read is that the United States is in many ways a global outlier in food safety. And so all of these chemical additives that are banned in many other countries we would consider our peers, and even countries we wouldn't consider our peers, are somehow still allowed in our food supply here in the United States.
Obviously, federal regulation would bring consistency to the manufacturers on what's being sold across the country. But I believe when there's federal inaction, states have a need and a right to step up and take action to protect their citizens. That's exactly what West Virginia did. We decided that we were going to take action. And if you look over the last year, the amount of manufacturers as well as other states that are getting on board, and I believe that was driven by states like West Virginia pushing that.
What we found is there is a gigantic loophole at the federal level, something known as the GRAS loophole. It's an acronym for Generally Recognized as Safe. And what it basically says is that on a lot of these new additives that for food, the chemical companies get to grade their own homework. And so we learned that something like close to 99% of the new additives that have entered our food supply over the last number of years have had no meaningful independent review by the FDA. So in my mind, the FDA should be doing this work. It should be stepping up. It should be protecting consumers, but they haven't been doing that job. And so, as we often say in California, when Washington fails to act, then we have a responsibility in the state legislature to step up and lead. And so that's what we did in California. And we say the approach we want to take is bipartisan, common sense, and science-based. And so we are rigorously following the science here in terms of what does and doesn't impact kids, what does and doesn't impact consumers. And so we want to have the science be our guide here in terms of what we should be focused on and thinking about.
Well, I think we've got to look at our overall health in America, but really in West Virginia, we are the unhealthiest state in the country. And so we've got to do something. We've got to act. And so I thought artificial dyes was a no-brainer in looking at the side effects and the problems that were coming from that. So it's not easy to balance figuring that out. I'm sure none of the legislators like myself, we're not scientists, we're not biologists and able to crack into that. But study the science, study the reports, put in the work. And you're going to see that artificial dyes and probably other chemicals and ingredients we're using are not healthy for our communities.
We also want to apply a lens of common sense, understanding that things have to be workable, that regulation and legislation has to be workable and implementable. It has to make sense for parents. It has to make sense for kids, for school districts.
I think everybody's looking at the government as kind of their guiding light when making decisions. And so when the government is approving these things in their food, it's really kind of taking the choice away from them because they're assuming that they're safe. And so government has a role to step up and say, hey, these things are unsafe, shouldn't be in our foods, and begin to remove the ingredients. Because that's what we've got to focus on. We're not banning products. We were banning unsafe ingredients that we knew there were natural substances that could be used in their place.
I guess I would say two things to that. One is, I think on a lot of levels, people are expecting that regulators, that government will protect them from risks that they don't understand. The other thing I'll say is part of the approach that we have taken here has really focused on schools for a number of reasons. Parents can go to the grocery store and they can make decisions on things like food dyes. Do I want to buy this cereal that has food dyes for my kids, or do I want to buy this version that doesn't have the food dyes? And we think that's a choice that parents can make. But in schools, the kids don't have a choice. And also the government is spending money. We're going to serve north of 1 billion school meals in the state of California this year. That's a lot. And so we think if we're spending taxpayer dollars, if we're spending taxpayer money, we want to be spending it in a way that is in the best interest of the kids, that's the most protective of the health and the safety of our kids. So again, we're trying to walk that line of respecting consumer choice, respecting the choices that adults can make when they have information, and also doing the things that we think that the people we work for would expect us to do to protect them and protect their kids.
I'm more on the side of just removing the harmful ingredients than warning labels, but I understand some states may not be able to tackle a robust ban of ingredients. So at least you should be putting warning labels on it. But I don't feel like as parents or as citizens in this country, we should have to walk through the aisles reading warning labels to see what is safe and isn't safe. So I really take the ban approach and more than I do the labeling approach.
Because these additives are banned in other countries, we have a strong sense that passing these bills is not going to pull any products or foods off the shelf, right? We're just simply asking, in many cases, the manufacturers to reformulate, to take out one ingredient, to slightly tweak their recipes, to slightly modify the recipes. And the reason we have such high confidence that they can do it is because they already do it in Europe. Right? Just give our kids the version that you're making in Italy. Give our kids the version that you're making in Japan. Give our kids the version that you're making in Peru or South Korea or any of these other countries. So we don't think this is going to pull products off the shelf. We don't think this is going to pull foods off the shelf. We think it's going to put a very small amount of pressure on manufacturers to tweak their to tweak their recipes, to make those minor modifications so that we can still have the foods that all of us love and enjoy. We can just have a slightly healthier version of it. If you look at the bill we're doing now around ultra-processed foods, and you look at the prior bills we've done, to me, one of the easiest ways to figure out which side of the issue you're on here is to look at who supports and opposes this legislation. Right. And so, for example, for the bill we're doing this year, it's supported by the California Medical Association. It's supported by the American Academy of Pediatrics. It's supported by nurses. It's supported by the state PTA. It's supported by scientists and researchers and all of the best, some of the best universities in California. And then on the other side are some food companies and some chemical companies and some trade associations. And so if you want to ask yourself who really has the best interest of our kids at heart, who really understands the science here and knows what's best for us, I'm going to trust the doctors and the teachers and the PTA over the chemical companies. And I think that that's part of the reason that so many of my colleagues have ended up supporting these bills, is because they've come to the same conclusion about who really has the best interests of our kids at heart.
Well, I think the main thing we've got to do is not accept status quo. We've really grown as a country. We looked at things like how can we large scale manufacture food? How can we make it longer to more stable on the shelves? How can we make it as efficient, as cheap as possible? And those things begin to bring in chemicals and additives that weren't necessary. And so let's just not accept status quo, because that's what we've always done. And let's really put in the time, put in the effort, and let's start looking at the health of our communities.